Today, I'm going to be going through my maintenance checklist on my snowmobiles before we go out riding. The sponsor for this video is myself. I just went out and bought a new Insta360 camera, and I'm super excited to use it. That's what I'm using right now in this angle. I'm going to give this a try this weekend out on the trails, and I'm going to post that video next week. I'm super excited, and I hope you follow along. Before we get into the preventative maintenance, I just want to say thank you. My channel just hit 100 subscribers, and I am beyond excited about that. I can't thank you guys enough, but it's time to get into it. I'm working on two Polaris snowmobiles today, a 2007 Polaris IQ LX 600 and a 2009 Polaris Dragon SP 600. I'm not a mechanic, just a regular rider getting my sleds ready to ride and learning as I go. As I'm going through the maintenance, I'll be referring to the owner's manual, and I'll put parts of it up on the screen so you can see exactly what I'm following. If you have any maintenance tips that could help other riders or help me, feel free to drop them in the comments. We're going to start by pulling the exhaust valves. On these two-stroke sleds, they build up carbon over time, which can lead to loss of power and poor throttle response. You'll need a 10mm socket for the bolts. I made the mistake of pulling all 4 bolts on one valve before realizing the top and bottom bolts just hold the cover, and the 2 side bolts are what actually let the valve come out. Since I took the cover off, I had to be careful not to drop the spring when pulling the valve off. Also, as you slide the exhaust valve out, little oil can come with it, so definitely have a rag handy just in case. Don't forget to disconnect the vacuum line off the port. That's if you still have one. On my other sled, the previous owner already deleted the line and capped the port. From what I've read, the main reason people do this isn't for big power gains. It's more about simplifying the system and making the exhaust valve behavior more consistent. What are your thoughts? Is it worth it to delete the vacuum line and cap the port? Alright, let's start pulling the exhaust valve apart so we can clean it up. You'll want to inspect the rubber boot for any cracks. You don't want any air leaks, so replace it if it looks worn or damaged. I ended up hitting the metal parts with some brake cleaner and gave them a scrub with a brass brush to remove the carbon buildup. I've also heard that carburetor cleaner works too, but I've never tried that myself. The brass brush and brake cleaner didn't remove all the carbon, so I let the metal parts soak in a container of old gasoline for a few hours. After that, another scrub helped break down the remaining carbon. When dealing with any type of flammable liquids or chemicals in general, always take the proper precautions and ensure your safety comes first. Before putting the exhaust valves back together, make sure these 3 ports are cleaned out. One feeds the vacuum line, and the 2 smaller internal ports help the valve operate correctly. These tend to build up a lot of carbon. I had some WD-40 on hand, so I sprayed a small amount into all 3 ports and used a Q-tip and pick where I could to remove the carbon. I repeated this until a flashlight could shine through the ports, meaning they were no longer blocked. I used an air compressor to blow out any excess WD-40 and made sure everything was cleaned off properly before putting them back in the sled. I've got the valves reassembled and ready to go back in the sled. But first, I'm going to replace the exhaust valve gasket. My local dealer only had 2 in stock, and I needed another 2 before my trip. Luckily, my uncle had a couple of spare gaskets that fit my sled. That's one of the perks of owning similar sleds to the people that you ride with. So here's a big shout out to my Uncle Dean for saving my trip. Here's a helpful tip. The guillotine only goes back into the sled one way. If it doesn't fit, flip just the guillotine 180 degrees and make sure the vacuum port is facing up. This sled doesn't have vacuum lines, but don't forget to attach yours if your sled has them. Up next, I'm going to remove and inspect my spark plugs. The manual recommends changing them every 2,000 to 2,500 miles, but I like to change them at the start of the season. If the spark plugs are still in good condition, I'll clean them and save them as spares. Both of my sleds use the same spark plugs, so buying them in bulk can save a bit of money. When installing new plugs, make sure to gap them correctly for your snowmobile and torque them to the specs in your manual. I'll show parts of the manual on screen for a brief second, so feel free to pause and check it out. Next up, I'm checking the cooling system. You want to make sure the coolant level is between the minimum and maximum marks on the coolant bottle, and always check this when the engine is cold. Running low on coolant can lead to overheating and some pretty serious engine damage. I went to order the coolant Polaris recommends in the owner's manual, and it turns out that part number has been superseded by a newer one. The updated Polaris coolant is item number 2880513, so that's what I'm using. Next, I'm topping off with VES full synthetic 2-cycle oil, which is what Polaris recommends for these sleds. Now let's get into some other important inspections. I've had shocks fail while the sleds were sitting over the off-season, so it's always important to check them out. The Walker Evans clicker shocks on my Dragon failed last year, and I had them rebuilt by a local shop. While we're on the topic of suspension, make sure you grease the suspension pivot shafts. The Polaris IQ LX has 4 grease Zerk fittings on the rear suspension. The Dragon rear suspension, on the other hand, has no grease points and does not require lubrication. Let's lubricate the drive shaft bearing. So we'll want to inject grease into the fitting on the speedometer sensor housing until grease purges from the seal on the inside of the tunnel. This usually takes about 2 pumps. Do not exceed 4 pumps, as over-greasing can damage the seal. It's also important to check the clutch and the drive belt. I'll leave the owner's manual on the screen for a few seconds, so feel free to pause the video and review Polaris' recommendations. It's also a good idea to check out your hyfax to make sure it's not worn out. Mine looks good for now, but I'll keep an eye on them through the season. Carbides are another key item. If they're worn, you'll notice it's harder to steer, especially when crossing roads or in a parking lot. If your carbides get too worn, they can actually damage your skis. On my Dragon, I've already noticed some wear, so these will probably need to be replaced by next season. I'd also recommend checking your bogey wheels. I've had some go missing or get damaged and had to replace them. Don't forget to check your track for any damage and make sure it's at the proper tension. Your owner's manual is a great resource for other maintenance inspections, but some of the best advice I can give is to take your snowmobile out for a quick ride before a big trip to make sure everything is working properly. If I can, I'll try to post a link to an owner's manual in the comments or the description of this video. I'll be posting some rides over the next few weeks, so make sure to subscribe. But most importantly, I hope you have a safe snowmobile season.